After the story of mankind, Vincent next appeared in a film that was much more buzzworthy, the 1958 science fiction classic, The Fly. A night watchman at the Delambre electronics factory investigates the sound of machinery being operated in the dead of night and discovers a woman fleeing from the room housing the industrial presses. Inside one of those presses, he discovers the body of Andre Delambre, scientist and co-owner of the factory, his head and one arm crushed beyond recognition. The police are called and the night watchman identifies the woman he had seen fleeing as Andre's wife, Helene, played by Patricia Owens. Andre's brother Francois, played by Vincent Price, is notified, and when he arrives he finds his brother's laboratory completely destroyed. He questions Helene, who admits that she did indeed kill her husband. While at first hesitant to reveal why, Francois eventually convinces her to tell the entire story, which we are shown in flashback. Turns out Andre Delambre, played by David Hedison, was working on a brand new project involving teleportation. He was obsessed with his work, locking himself in his basement laboratory for weeks on end. After several unsuccessful attempts, including one unfortunate mishap with a family cat, Andre finally solves the problem. He gleefully shows his progress to Helene, using a guinea pig as his test subject, disintegrating its atoms and reintegrating them in a second location. He invites Francois over for a demonstration the following day, but when he arrives at the house, he finds Andre locked in his lab again, a piece of paper explaining that he will be unable to join them. Later that afternoon, Andre and Helene's son Philippe, played by Charles Herbert, shows his mother a strange insect that he captured in the garden, a fly with a white head and arm. She instructs him to set it free. Later that evening, Andre slips another note under the door, informing Helene he has had an accident and is unable to speak. He asks her to bring a bowl of milk laced with rum. Andre has a black cloth draped over his head, which he refuses to remove, and keeps one arm tucked into his lab coat pocket. He makes Helene go into the other room while he drinks the milk. Andre is able to communicate with Helene via a typewriter, which he uses with one hand. He instructs her to search for a fly with a white head. She informs him that Philippe had caught it earlier and released it, which upsets him. His arm slips from his lab coat pocket, and Helene sees that his hand has been replaced with the claw of a fly and flees in terror. The following day, Helene returns to the lab, and Andre gives her another note explaining what happened. He had attempted to transport himself, and in the process, a fly slipped into the disintegration chamber, unbeknownst to him. Upon reintegration, their atoms became entangled. He needs the fly to try to reverse the effects. Helene desperately searches for the fly with the help of her son and housekeeper, almost catching it at one point before it escapes through a crack in a window. Helene convinces Andre to go through the teleportation device one more time in hopes that the effects will be reversed. When he reappears, she yanks the cloth from his head, resulting in one of cinema's most memorable moments. She faints and Andre places her on a couch. He suddenly finds himself tempted to attack her as the fly arm reaches for her menacingly. Realizing that his humanity is slowly slipping away, Andre smashes his laboratory and burns his notes so no one can duplicate his experiments. He then convinces Helene to help destroy him and climbs inside the hydraulic press. Police Inspector Shiras, played by Herbert Marshall, still doesn't believe her story and sends for orderlies from the local insane asylum to take Helene away the following day. At the last minute, Philippe informs Francois that he saw the white-headed fly in the garden trapped in a web. Inspector Shiras and Francois run to the garden and discover the fly with Andre's head in place of its own stuck in the web, pleading to them for help, just as the hungry spider is descending on it. In horror, the police inspector lifts a huge rock and smashes the two insects. Realizing the truth, the men concoct a story that explains Andre's death as a suicide and clears Helene's name. The Fly was directed by Kurt Newman for 20th Century Fox and based on a short story of the same name by George Langellin, which was published in Playboy magazine the previous year. This film was followed by two sequels, Return of the Fly in 1959 and Curse of the Fly, 1965, as well as two remakes in the 1980s, The Fly, 1986, directed by David Cronenberg, and The Fly 2 in 1989. Interestingly, Price would act again with Charles Herbert, who played young Philippe in this film, the following year, 1959, in the TV show Riverboat, in an episode titled Witness No Evil. In it, Price plays a circus owner transporting animals on board the boat, among them a gorilla trained to steal passengers' valuables. The Fly kicks off what I consider to be the golden era of Price's horror cinema. Over the next decade, he would appear in a string of science fiction and horror classics that would forever cement him as a horror icon. Next up, Price would be teamed with one of America's premier showmen, director William Castle, in the 1959 classic The House on Haunted Hill.
I can't believe it.
Thanks a lot, Citibank. You had to make your Visa and MasterCard better than other banks. Just by using them, we earn bonuses called City Dollars. Now, they could have saved us up to 40% on a color TV or a stereo. But we used ours to get something strictly for Vincent's amusement.
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
Citibank's Visa and MasterCard. It's Citibank that makes them better.